I'm Stacey, and I am a woman empowerment coach, and I'm so excited to share a soulful self-care conversation today.
Sunshine, good to see you again. Had to walk out to let you back in. Stuck in a storm of a relationship. Lost my fire. Oh, and I forgot about me for way too long. But it's rolled on. Now there ain't no shade around here. Once you leave the
And you are back for another episode of Soulful Self-Care Conversations. And I'm so excited because this area we're going to talk about today, all different areas I love. It's what I love to coach on, and some of it's what I've gone through personally in my life as well. And so today, Stacey Johnson, who is a grief coach and resilience mentor, along with the founder of Anchor Resilience, she helps accomplished women stop over functioning, regulate emotions, and rediscover themselves. Through her spiritual behavior shift method, she guides women to build peaceful relationships, heal after loss, and rise as confident leaders in life and family. I'm so excited to have you here today, Stacey. I know you and I spoke before about my grief journey, and I'm really excited to share this very important message with others. So, those that are listening, grab a cup of tea. But if you drink coffee, I'll forgive you. Grab a piece of paper and a pen. But if you're driving, just turn it up, listen closely, and then come back and read the show notes because everything will be in there. But welcome to the show, Stacey.
Thank you, Pearl. Thanks for having me.
Yes, definitely. Okay, so one of the things that I always do with the show, we start out with only one question that's predetermined. The rest is truly a conversation. And that is, Stacy, we want you to introduce us to little Stacy. We want you to take us back to time when that little girl was looking at the world as a big, huge fishbowl and what she wanted to do in life. Tell us a little bit about what little girl Stacy was like and what she wanted to be when she grew up to this amazing adult she is today and how the two might correlate together.
Yes, when I was younger, I think like every little girl wanted to be a teacher, and I just wanted to, I saw this passion for helping kids even at a younger age, like I thought of being a teacher. I knew I didn't want to be a nurse because I did not like blood. So, uh, yeah, my parents had divorced when I was young, and and I had some pretty powerful teachers, and so I wanted to be like that.
I so funny. It's interesting how many coaches that come on and speak with me have the same kind of thing. My little girl too wanted to be a teacher growing up. I wanted to impact the elementary age kids and really make a difference in their lives. And I didn't have the opportunity to do that either. However, I jokingly tell my clients, my friends, I get to coach them now when they're like this great middle-aged female and doing these powerful things or need to get back on path to doing the powerful things that we've put our armor on of all the titles we wear instead of being who we are meant to be, our living our who Stacy's supposed to be, who's Pearl's supposed to be, whoever the listener put in your name is supposed to be. So I love that you remind us of that. So thank you so much for letting us play with little girl Stacy for a few minutes. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
little girl Stacy wanted to be a teacher, and then when she went to college, realized there was a lot of teachers that went into psychology.
Yeah, it's just crazy how that everything shifts and that's what like our oldest one college wasn't for him. He did a year, I was like that's not him. My youngest one, college was for him. Got a great career, met an amazing wife, and they actually work for the same company and the same type of career. So you just never know where you're going to be brought to. Us, I think it's awesome.
Right.
So tell us a little bit like the your grief coaching and resilience. What bring us to how that anchor resilience became about.
Yes, yes. So as I said, I went into psychology in college and ended up with a master's in counseling. And I worked for a school for many years and found myself in that burnout stage, overwhelmed. And because of that burnout, I missed probably moments of my life, just because I was exhausted or I was snapping at my kids or my husband. And then it'll be 4 years at the end of this month. My stepfather passed away suddenly. And then 3.5 weeks later, my husband passed away. And so and during the first couple months of my grief journey, I went back to work within about 5 weeks after my husband passed away. And I was working and I was, going through the motions of doing what I thought was expected, especially from the training that I had as a therapist, just doing everything and not really connecting to that. My nervous system was dysregulated still from the trauma. And attended, some workshops from a grief coach. And I'm like, everything she's sharing is everything that I know to do. And so as I continued to grow in my grief journey and get stronger and more resilient, I was seeing that I was resilient more than I thought I was. And that's when I decided that I wanted to help women, and it's not just about the funeral type of loss. It's about that loss of our identity too, because, a lot of times I was just talking to my good friend yesterday on our walk is that, women fall into this like we're somebody's daughter and then we move out of our parents' home and, most likely then, become a wife and a mom. And so then we're somebody's wife and somebody's mom. And we're always something, all these titles, and we don't even know who we are. And so I did know that through my grief journey, I also had to find who really was Stacey. And that's been part of my grief journey too, is all the silent grief that went along with, the loss of my husband.
That's so powerful, and I'm so sorry for your loss, and to be so close to one another too. It's like, you're just starting to realize, the acceptance and the therapy and then working on the first, and then somebody, even more close to you. I remember everything you were saying, like going through the motions. It really resonated with me because we lost our son 3 years ago, this past July, in a tragic car accident. And I remember, like, everybody was here at the house, but people were flying in from all over. And I remember I got a phone call, and it was somebody I knew. I'd spoken at a couple of events, and she's like, "Hey, at the moment she told me I was getting an award, the city of Syracuse was being named after me, and I was like, okay, okay, yeah, 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 I'll be there, be there. I wasn't listening. Like, I was acknowledging somebody was talking in my ear, but I wasn't like fully listening. And so I was
Right.
like, okay, yes. And so Matt passed in July on the 25th, and then September was coming up. I was supposed to go to this event, and I was like, I said to my business coach at the time, like, I'm supposed to go to this event, but I'm not sure. And she's like, well, then don't go if you don't feel comfortable going. And I'm like, okay. So when I called, she's like, Pro, you cannot not come because the city of Syracuse is being named after you. And I was like, and the most ironic thing is that really had no connection to Syracuse other than this person. She knew people there. However, my grandfather, who was very close in our adoption process and having kids process, with our oldest son Matthew, and then our younger son Nate, he was from Syracuse. So it was like, this is a sign to be like, I've got Matt, go and do this, And it was really, it was sort of like, again, I was there going through the motions. I look back, it was a beautiful thing. It was a beautiful setup, and it was like early fall that all this happened. But yeah, it's like when you said going through the motions, I remember that first, like, probably year or 6 months to a year, that was just like, okay, I have to get up, I have to do this, and to wear, like you were talking about the title and the armors, like, I was wearing this grief armor at the time. It's like, okay, I need to like really get back to do the work I coach other people to do, right? And
Right.
rightfully so, people would have been like, if I stayed in my bed the rest of my life and cried my life away, they'd be like, oh, she lost a son. But I knew, because 2 days before Matt passed, he edified who I was becoming, right? He recognized that I was stepping into who I was meant to be. I was no longer wearing the armor of the titles, the wife, the mom, volunteer. I wasn't wearing those armors anymore. That I was like, I have to continue living that life. I have to, in his honor. And I have an amazing husband. I have another son, so I have to show up. And plus, Matthew had a beautiful girlfriend who probably would have been his wife, and her daughter, who he loved as his own. So I was like, I have to step into this who I am again, you know? And so when you were saying that, I was like, yeah, I get that. But I love too that you touched on how grief isn't just about the loss of somebody. It's also the loss of our identity, the loss of, like me, I've divorced my parents. It's the loss of my parents. I had to grieve that process. And, my brother's kind of going through that with my mom, and he already kind of went through it with my dad. And to watch him in this process of going, well, how do I navigate it? Because they pop up into our life. They want to pop up back in and stir the pot of emotions again, and you feel guilty because you're like going, well, I need to have these boundaries, but I'm also their child, So it's like that whole finding the balance, And so when you were saying that, I was like, yeah, there's so many other forms of grief. I mean, granted,
Oh,
losing someone is huge, and I would never wish the loss of a child on anybody, but like you said, like there's so many different forms. And then as you said in your bio, like how to regulate those emotions and rediscovering who we are is so powerful. So tell us a little bit about like how do you help your clients do that? How did you do that?
yes, yes, thank you. Yeah, so, the one thing that I really had to get tuned into, and one thing that I help my client is tuning into the emotions. You know, we Yes, and especially, like during grief, someone says, "How are you?" And even outside of grief, we typically answer, "Okay." Even if we're feeling really, really crummy, it's okay or fine. Well, that doesn't help me identify what I'm really feeling. And so learning to accept the feeling that I'm feeling and acknowledge it, but then how do we release it so that we don't continue? Because every time we say okay or fine, it's a one way that our brain is just stuffing that emotion. And when we stuff our emotions, it is another way that our body stays dysregulated. And so help my clients, one, with the use of emotional wheels, and we look at, accepting that feeling, how to release the feelings that we don't want so that we can be open to the higher level feelings of like excited and joy, and then also recognizing that you can, like you did, like you went to that event and it was a beautiful event, but there were probably moments that you were missing your son or sad. So we can have both at the same time as well. So doing a lot of work around feelings and regulating our nervous system, and through a lot of my work with women, we discover that underneath all of that is also these limiting beliefs that kind of circulate in our own brain. So learning how to recognize those limiting beliefs and change the story that we have.
Yeah, changing the story we have is so, empowering because when we can work through that and push through the limiting beliefs, what comes out the other side is really beautiful and accepting. And you're right. Like we're talking about when I went to Syracuse, I had huge moments of the grief and even today, like here we are 3 years later, it will come up. I could start off having a great day and I can hear a song and just like cry. I remember where was I at? I was somewhere. I was in Kansas City last weekend for an event, and we went in the grocery store to Target, and we went to go pick up balloons for this event. And the song, oh my gosh, from Fast and Furious, it's that song for the
Oh,
guy who passed away. I can't think of what it's called off the top of my head.
right.
Every time I'm out and away somewhere from home, that song comes on and it's a reminder of Matthew, And I was sitting there and the song came into the store and a girl that was with me and she looked at me, she goes, "You okay?" I'm like, and I was crying. I go, every time I'm away from home, somehow or another this song plays. And she didn't know that I lost my son. And I said, it reminds me of my son. She's like, "Your son?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And I told her, she's like, "I'm so sorry." I go, "Don't be sorry." I said, "Just help me acknowledge this moment. That's all I want is the acknowledge of the moment." And
Right.
I don't want pity because I can say we were blessed to raise him for 25 years. It was a blessing. I still have, last night I had the craziest, funniest dream about him last night. So it's like, all of a sudden he showed up out of the blue. He's like, "You want to go to a movie?" I'm like, "Don't you want to talk about what's going on?" I was like, it was the craziest thing, but I just, those moments I take and then you said something too that resonated with me and reminded me too is for those that are listening, I want you to hear this thing I'm going to say. And that is when you ask somebody like how they're doing, don't be surprised because the person that's now listening has had some grief. Tell them the truth. Like, be honest. You know what? I'm having a good day, but I'm also having some struggles and missing my loved one or whatever that case may be. And also for the person that wants to support, one of the best things that somebody did when, especially like the first few months that Matt passed, they said, somebody came and they said, I don't know what to say or what to do. I'm like, that's okay. That's okay. Nobody knows what to say or what to do in this situation. And for
Right.
me, that means that you recognize that this is a crazy thing. This is an unnatural thing that we're going through. And that how can I support you? Right. Or even just those words, how can I support you today? Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. So having those moments, but like you said, tuning into the emotion. I remember my first grief meeting I went to with, and Lisa, she's listening. We both say we're really good friends, but we wish we never met each other because she sat with my family and I at the funeral, and she also lost a son, right? So we both wish we weren't in this club together. But I remember like her and I were together, and somebody was talking about the, the the different processes and everything and how people ignore it. I don't want you to ignore it, but my first grief meeting I went to with her, there was a lady that was sitting there, and God bless her, she had lost her son, and then I think shortly later it was her nephew or grandson, I can't remember. And it had been 20 years, I think, since she lost her son. And she's like, I don't, she was crying. She's like, this is why I don't like to come to these meetings because I cry. And I reached over to her and I said, can I say thank you? Thank you for reminding me that this feeling is never going to go away and it's going to come up at some shape or form, and acknowledge it. Don't be afraid to come because you actually give me comfort to know that 20 years from now I'm still going to miss them, and it's okay to still miss them, and it's okay to have these feelings.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. I always say that, grief is part, but like we grieve because we love someone, and that's why that grief, it doesn't really go away when they pass. And there's no timeline because there was no timeline on love. Like I will always love my husband. It won't, nothing will change that. So, yeah, there's going to be days that
Yeah. I'm glad you said that too, because like I have a friend, she just wrote a book. Lisette, if you're listening, I love you, girlfriend. She wrote a book and she talks about how she lost her husband. He was in the service and she remarried, and her husband that she's married to now, he encourages her to remember her husband that passed, right? He encourages it because he knows that that's a huge part of who she is, and probably they would not have ever met if this unfortunate situation had not happened, right? So it's that encouragement to be like it's a safe space. And I feel like sometimes I think if you're listening to us, part of this episode is what to say, what not to say to a griever. Because I remember somebody posted online that somebody had said, "Shouldn't you be over it by now?" And I was like, God bless the soul that ever says that to me. So if you're listening and see me, don't say it to me because you're going to get a fist. Because I said I would probably be in jail because, like you just said, there's no timeline on it. There's absolutely not a timeline on it.
yes. Yeah. I mean, for sure, no timeline on it because there was no timeline on my love. Like, once I, started loving him, it didn't stop because he is no longer here.
Right, right. So tell us a little bit about the spiritual behavior shift method. Like I know, working with women and that, guiding through and building the peaceful relationships. Tell us how that helps and how where the healing after loss ties into that.
Yeah. My spiritual behavioral shift method is something that I teach inside my Anchor Resilience program. And it is uh, a way that we can, connect to ourselves. And it is work with around grounding and mindfulness. And I start at my every morning with it. And it just gives me that time for myself to be able to check in with myself. And I then also, it's a way that I, release it's a way that I've helped women release and change those internal stories, that those beliefs that we have, like, I mean, so many women that I work with, they have this belief that I'm not good enough, you know. And where did it come from? It could come from, childhood. It could have come from, the perceptions that we create in our own brain. But somewhere along the line, most of the women I have, work with have that belief. And so using the spiritual behavioral shift method helps them connect to themselves, but then also changes that story.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great reminder because as we grow up, that's why I like talking to the little Stacy and when at the beginning of the show, because I want to recognize her that, she is important. She is a part of who you are. Little Pearl's part of who I am, and she's been through some things in the life that has shaped who she is today, whether it's emotionally or what we do in our career. We've been through some stuff, and I remember and we have a program within our program. It's within our Shiro Method program where you can be part of our membership program, and it's called the Shiro League. And in that, we were the group of ladies that we were working with at the time. We're like, we're going to do inner child work, and it was interesting because they fought it. They did not want to work on that inner child, and one person was like, well, I've never had anything bad happen in my life. I go, it's not meaning anything bad happened. It meaning somebody could have said something at some point that changed your thought. It could have been something as simple as go stand in the corner, the adults are speaking. It could be something as simple as that, that child, it was a switch that just went, hey, this is how it affected me. And they struggled so hard, Stacey, that we had to stop. Like we couldn't get them to acknowledge their like one or two girls were like all in, but the majority of them were not in. So we did some separate work with them. But it was really interesting to see that whole thing transpire and how that
Hmm.
transpired. And our talk to self really can change so many things in our life. And I like that you are, that your method is definitely like helping create that peaceful relationships with ourselves and with others too, right? Because our family life and and our personal life, when you take everything else away, if your job went away tomorrow, if your house went away tomorrow, if it's just you and you didn't even have a car, it just was you standing in the middle of a road somewhere, what's your relationship with yourself? Like how is that looking?
Right.
And yeah, and I think it's powerful to talk about that. So share a little bit about that relationship with self.
Yes. I mean, I've seen it with my own self, like, instead of, example, I'm a therapist as well as a coach. And so there's days that I can see clients back to back to back. And 5 years ago, I would have been exhausted, at the end of the day, just mentally drained because I would take on everybody else's kind of feelings. But now that I have more of that connection to myself, I'm able to, even because I do break up, seeing clients, I always give myself at least 5 minutes in between. And sometimes just a simple grounding technique, gets me back into mine, and I can connect to myself and I release all the everybody else's feelings. And at the end of the day, I don't feel that exhaustion of taking, working with clients back to back. But then also, working with some of my clients, when they're able to connect to themselves and they change that internal message, they've opened up their life to be able to receive so much more. My most recent client, now that she's been able to connect to herself at a more deeper and personal level, and release the negative thoughts, not be in that lower level feelings and be up in the higher vibrations. She's, you know, has two really good job offers. She, got engaged. So all the better things happen when we can connect to ourselves and know who we are and that's when you're connected to yourself, you really start to see your own feelings and your own internal beliefs.
It's so true. It's like when you do get that connection to yourself, it's like it's so powerful to watch how you unfold. I remember I tell the story about Megan Trainor, when she first had her first child, and it's interesting. I'm going to share the story, and I'm going to share what's happening to her today. So she felt like she didn't feel like she loved her body, right? I mean, my goodness, we as women go through so much when we deliver a child. And so her therapist like, I want you to stand in front of the mirror naked and I want you to find the beauty of your body. And she's like, are you crazy? She's like, yeah, and I want you to stand like a couple feet away from the mirror. And she said the first couple of days or whatever, she just was uncomfortable doing it. She didn't like herself. And then she started saying, oh, I have that little roll there or that bulges because I have this beautiful son. She started equating the things on her body to what's in her world today. And it was at the point that I had heard that I, excuse me, I remember looking in the mirror one time shortly after Matt passed, and I've got like this little wrinkle, and I'm like, where the heck does this wrinkle in my eye come from? And then I realized, you know what? That's because I was crying and missing Matthew. So those wrinkles, they're there, and that edifies it. Now let's come full circle. Just recently, I mean, she was beautiful no matter who she is. Her music is amazing. Her messaging in her music is amazing. And so she's been on this health journey to get healthier. And people are now giving her a hard time saying she's too thin. It's like, you know what? Just leave, let us be where we are. It's our self thing. And so around that time when the first part of her standing in front of the mirror was happening, I remember I was working with a client who was like, hold on one second, sorry. Sorry, I had tickle in my throat for those that are listening or watching. But anyway, so she was standing in front of there, and I remember I was working with a client who said, Pearl, I'm sick and tired of saying affirmations that don't sound real. And I was like, well, give me an example. And she's like, well, this previous coach I work with, she kept telling me, stand in front of the mirror because she wanted to have more income, right? Stand in front of the mirror and tell yourself you have all the money in the bank, right? She goes, but Pearl, I don't have all the money in the bank I want. I'm like, okay, so flip the switch. What if you stood in front of the mirror and say, I'm going to go out today and do activities, emotions that are going to bring abundance into my life. It could be abundance of clients. It could be abundance of income. It could be abundance of love for yourself. Whatever that is, let it come in. Just tell it to come in. And she's like, I never thought about that. I'm like, yeah, it doesn't have to be the negative. It can be positive. Like talk to yourself positively. In fact, yesterday, so I coach for a nonprofit. So if you're a nonprofit out there looking for coaching, I do coach for nonprofits, and I work with a nonprofit here locally where I am in Tampa. And we were working last night about setting their visions and everything. And she's like, and then one of the clients says, I have to. I said, not have to. You get to. You get to go find that job that's your ideal job. You get to go do something for your kids. If we say we have to, then our brain is like, oh my gosh, here we go. I got to go do this now. But if we say I get to, it's like, wow, I get to go and go outside, sit in my front porch swing. I get to have a conversation with Stacey today, right? It's like it's a whole change in that mindset piece that plays into it. Would you agree?
I totally agree. And on top of that is that the affirmations, so our nervous system being regulated plays a role into believing those affirmations. If our body is dysregulated and we're saying these affirmations, then our brain is basically calling baloney or bullshit on it. They're like, it's not true because your body's not feeling it because it's not regulated. So, and that's one of the things that I work with my clients too, is because we have to have that, like I say, it's like the whole person. Your brain and your body have to be kind of connected and regulated. We can change the mindset, but if your body's still dysregulated, it's not kind of believing that change in the mindset as well.
Yeah, I love that. That's 100% true. You have to believe it. You have to like stand in front of there and, remind yourself and tell yourself the things that while it may not be reality right now, you can
Right.
create the reality. It's like if
Right.
you say, and that's the other thing I have, I was talking earlier on a recording, and we're talking about how if we say everything happens to me, well, everything is going to happen to you, but it could be everything good happens to me. And, instead of saying, why do I attract all these terrible men in my life or all this bad stuff? Well, you keep telling yourself you're going to keep recognizing all the stuff that's not good coming into your life. But if you say, you know what, oh my gosh, I'm bringing abundance in my life, or oh my gosh, I'm going to meet the person today that's going to connect me with, XYZ that you want in your life. That's what we bring in. And I was sharing how I went through a situation with my mom, and I remember, because I do this work, because I know how to talk to myself, because I know how to set the boundaries and release it, and not bring it into my emotions. I remember walking up my stairs here to my office, and I was like, "Oh, I'm so." It sounds crazy for listening to us, but I was like, "I'm so glad that happened to me because I know how to handle it and not happen to my client who's going through XYZ situation that's similar, because she would have been like in a rabbit hole, right?" And so it's like we have to get our body to understand things don't have to happen to you that are negative, but if you tell yourself, that's what you're going to attract. And I remember my son Matt, before he passed, like a few, like 6 8 months before he passed, he says he used to tell us, and this has been for years, he used to tell us for years, you know, mom and dad, I don't know why I have this feeling I'm never going to live past 25. I'm like, could you stop saying that? Like, don't put that in this world. And he passed at 25 years old. Now, he was an empath. I was an empath, but I used to say, do not put that in the world. And he would get mad because I would walk out of the room sometimes. I'm like, I'm not going to listen to this. I'm walking. And so,
Right.
there's a lot to be said about, and I'm not saying because he turned 25, that's why he passed, but he made a wrong decision. He was drinking and driving and made a bad choice. And my point is, when we tell ourselves these negative things, that's what's going to come into our world.
Yes, I agree on that.
Yeah. And so I love I love the program that you're doing. I love that you're helping, becoming this confident leaders, because I feel like in today's world, I love, and I've reached out to this mom a few times, but there's even more moms that are doing this now. So if you're a mom, listen up, keep doing this. I love the moms who teach their kids to stand up in front of a mirror and be like, I am a da, 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 da. At our retreat recently, one of our speakers, she played this mirror, this little girl. The mom closed the door, and this little girl is standing on the bathroom sink, and her little butt is dancing all over the place, saying, I love this. I do this. It was just like going, going, going. And we're like, this is what we have to keep in our lives. When we get older and stuff happens to us, you have to remember this little girl dancing. Like, just put that picture in your head of that little girl dancing and put your face on her body, because we need to do more of that, because I'm 61 on Monday. My mother did not
Happy
know how to
birthday.
do. Thank you, darling. My mother didn't know how to do this stuff. My granny didn't know how to. Generationally, we were taught take care of everybody, all women. And I
Right.
joke, it was only 50 years ago that we as women could get a checking account, buy a house, right? So
Right.
we've been doing this for all these years. So the moms that are raising girls today, there's so much truth that 0 to 7 is what we teach our girls or our kids or our boys, whatever. That's what they're going to believe. So if you can teach them and pour into them and let them every day, like, don't let them go out of the house, including your boys, without having positive affirmations. I really feel like we can make some changes in this world right now.
I would agree on that. I mean, because and as you talked about, like, the mom story, like, it's sometimes like our kids are sponges and they can absorb our energy, our feelings without us really even saying anything. And so if we're walking around the house like rushing, because that's what moms do, like trying to get everybody out the door, and we've got that kind of like energetic feeling, then our kids start to feel that stress. And or even just the words we do say, as moms, like. And so it's if we can, yeah, act like that little girl dancing in the mirror
It
and
was
having
such a
fun with
fun
life.
video. Yeah, it was such a fun video watching it. I remember, and my sister-in-law, I talk about her all the time on the show. So if you guys are watching, you're going to hear it again or listening. And if my sister-in-law Melissa is watching or listening, this is a shout out to you again. But I remember visiting her and my brother when they were still living in California. And I remember, like, my nephew Sean was maybe 3 years old, if he was that old. And she's like, "Hey, we're gonna go upstairs. Sean's gonna put his clothes away. You want to come?" I looked at her, and go, "Sean's gonna put his clothes away?" She's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Oh my God, this is so cool." And I walked away from that time that I spent with them going, women are living lives like they think they're stay-at-home moms, right? And you are a mom who's staying home. But it doesn't mean you're sitting around eating bonbons every day. You're running a household, brick and mortar household. That's your business. And so here's the thing. You don't have to do it all. You can teach your kids at a young age how to put their clothes away. It's not going to be perfect the way we would want it, probably, but the act of learning is the most important part of that. That's how, like you were talking about, that sponging, right? The act of going, okay, Johnny, okay, Mary Sue, bring me your dish, right? Let even, let them break. If it breaks, it breaks. Who cares? But they're learning, and they're understanding that you are not, the person who has to do it all. Because here's the thing: if we're not here tomorrow, your family's going to figure it out. So do something for yourself first.
Well, and you bring up a very good point because that's what the other part I help my clients do is letting go of that control that it has to be the way we want it. Yes, that mean it would be great. But again, letting that control go and teaching our kids and passing on some of the obligations. You don't have to do it all alone. You don't. And it took me a while to learn that. And I wish I would have done it more when my kids were younger because then I probably would have, had more joyful moments. And I think that's one of the things that when my husband passed away, I realized that there were probably more times in my life than I really wanted to count that I snapped because again, like I was taking on this role of doing it all versus passing on some of the obligations and just sharing more of the joyful moments.
That's so true. That made me that reminded me of something I want to share while we're on this subject. And that is so growing up, I lived in a household where you just did what you were supposed to do. You didn't ask how high I had to jump, you just jumped. And
Right.
so I remember that. And so when we had kids, I remember one time, so we'd gone on vacation, my husband and my parents came and stayed with our kids. And a few months later, after we were home, I was doing something, and my oldest said, "You sound like Papa." And I'm like, "Okay." He's like, and like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "That's just not, you sound like Papa." And my parents could never be grandparents. They couldn't be the fun one. They still had to be parents, right? And so I'm like, okay, so I didn't like that because that triggered me because of how I grew up, right? So I'm like, I got to change this because I'm snapping back at them when they're saying I sound like my parents. So finally I said, hey, I don't like that you say I sound like grandma and papa. So can we change it? Can we create a word that when you think I sound like them, just use that word? And so we're big Buffalo Bills fans. So we said, let's do Buffalo. So when they would say Buffalo, that would stop me, be like, oh, well, what about what I said made you want to say Buffalo? So it took the trigger from me and an open conversation with the boys to say, well, because you talk this way or that way, blah, 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 whatever it was. So it was something that I learned through my coaching experience and everything to say, let's create a different kind of buffer so I'm not triggered. So to teach our kids how to have good communication is really, really important too, because like you said, they are sponges and they're going to learn parenting skills from us that they're going to bring forward to their kids.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. This has been such a good conversation. I don't know. We should call it all kinds of things because I think it's parental tips and tips and tricks of
Right.
all different parts of life. But so tell everybody, Stacey, like how they can reach you. How can they learn more about your spiritual behavior shift method?
Yes, they can reach me. My website is staceyjohnsoncoaching.com. Email is the same thing, Stacy at staceyjohnsoncoaching.com. And I'm on Facebook and YouTube and TikTok. And so you can watch me on any of those as well and reach out to me. And yeah, I teach my spiritual behavioral method inside my coaching. And every once in a while, I'll do a master class and have it given in there too.
I love great master classes. They're so, so much fun. So we're going to put everything in the show notes. You guys, if you're driving and can't write any of that down, go back and watch and listen and view the show notes. You can get a hold of Stacey that way. And before we let Stacey go, so Stacey, at the end of every show, we do this thing. We have these cards are called Better Questions, Better Life. So we're going to shuffle the cards. You're going to tell me when to stop, and we're going to answer the card together. So here we go. Tell me when to stop.
Okay, stop.
All right. So your card says, ooh, am I stretching myself?
I probably am because by doing, um, just by being present, one with myself, but then also doing things that are outside of my comfort zone, kind of like this, being more on podcast interviews and showing up for myself on, TikTok and YouTube. And I'm not always, you know, Like yesterday, I think I did a TikTok and I had my hair up in a messy bun coming home from a walk. So, it's not always, and I think that's where I'm stretching myself, is not always being like this perfect picture that I am a mom, a working mom with a busy life as well.
I love that. And it's and you made me remind me I've got to share something with the audience. I love that you said that because we don't need to show up perfectly all the time. It's one of the reasons why I do my Soulful Self-Care PJ retreats is because we walk out the door and we just have ourselves all put together that we think the world needs to see us in when we have all kinds of stuff we're working on the inside. So I love that my retreat, it's called Soulful Self-Care PJ retreats. It's no makeup, PJs required, or yoga pants, right? And you can let the girls hang loose all weekend because it's just us girls together. But what's so powerful in this past, we just had one a couple weeks ago, is the things that you let loose and bring out is so amazing. So we had four speakers that were going to speak on something totally different. And at the retreat, they all said, "Can I just share something about myself?" And they shared deep secrets that other people don't know about them. Right. So when you can release and be that natural self, I love that you got on TikTok. I was like, my hair's up and everything. People want to see that, And one of the things that we're doing in November. So if you're listening, listen up closely. We're doing no filter November. And so what that means is like it could be different filters could be different things for different people. Like some people, if you're listening, Elizabeth, I love you to death. But Elizabeth, I've told her she's not allowed to put any filters on her picture she's putting online, right? Because when we put a filter on, we don't get to see the beauty. And she's like, "Well, I do because I don't wear makeup." I'm like, "Do you know I never knew you didn't wear makeup? Because when I'm with you, your skin is so naturally beautiful. I think you have makeup on, right?" And so there's another girl, I won't call her out, but I'm going to send her a private message that she is a beautiful woman. And I went to one of her events and she's like this somehow or another there's authentic in her description of what she coaches, right? And I'm like, everything she has is a filter, including when she's standing on the beach. And I'm like, that's not being authentic. If you're telling me you're an authentic coach and you're teaching me to be authentic, you're filtering every single thing you're putting online. That's not authentic. Because when I arrived, she looked totally different than what I saw online, right? And so that's not being authentic. And so filter could be like no makeup, or filter could be no filter. For my husband and I, we're going to filter out sugar. Like we're going to have no sugar month in November, right? So the filter could mean different things. Filter could mean I'm going to learn how to say no to somebody else and something 3 times a
Sure.
day, right? So we're going to do that in November. It's no filter month. I usually do no makeup month, but I'm like, I want to do something different this year. Something especially as we're going into the new year, like what is something you want next year? And how can we start building on it now? So if it's like, for me, the other part is my word for next year. I'm already working on it called streamline. What am I streamlining out of my business? What kind of things am I spending money on that I can get rid of that I don't need to be spending that money on, right? So I'm already like, in fact, my husband's gone this week. I'm like, I'm going to look at my stuff. I'm going to streamline subscriptions and whatever that is, right? And so that's what we're doing in November, because when we can start streamlining or filtering out the things that don't serve us, stretching, that's where my stretching's coming in. That's how we can stretch ourselves. So I love that you are stretching yourself, being authentically on social media and everything, because people want to see who we really are. They don't want
Right.
to see the fluff because they know that the fluff is, just the fluff, So I think it's powerful. I love that we had this conversation today. We'll put everything on how to reach you online. But before I let you go, and before we say goodbye to the audience, I just want to remind everybody, we come into this world, we are a rough oyster. There's a lot of work to be done to open that oyster up. But as you open the oyster up, you're going to find your inner pearl to greatness. And you're going to go be the shero that you are, strong, happy, empowered, radiant, original self. So go out and do that today. And I want to thank you again, Stacey, for being on the
Thank
show.
you.
Oh my gosh, that was so much fun, you guys. Like Stacey and I went into the conversation thinking we were going to talk about one thing. We talked about something totally differently, from grief to, what to say, what not to say to people grieving, to motherhood and things we say to our kids. So as we said, we're all sponges. So I want you to walk away from this episode thinking, what am I soaking up in my life today that does not serve me anymore? And when you think about that, I want you to squeeze that out. I want you to really think about a sponge, and you're squeezing out the things that don't serve you anymore. And it could be the negative self-talk. It could be people in your life that are not really serving you any longer. Squeeze that out and get rid of that. And if you want help identifying those areas of your life, just go to wsliving.com. Again, wsliving.com. Book a cup of tea with me. Let's spend a little bit of time together and just identify some of the things. It's a totally free call. Talk to you soon.
All clean. Why'd it take so long to